More will be coming during our subsequent bulletins, so you want to stay tuned to KBC Channel 1. We now want to switch gears to an interactive session, and we want to talk about matters diaspora community, diaspora investments. Remember that diaspora remittances are the biggest foreign exchange earner for Kenya. In 2022 alone, $4 billion just flowed into Kenya in terms of diaspora remittances. As at October 2023 for this year, it was about $3.4 billion US. Of course, we shall be seeing the annual at the end of the year or early next year. And we want to have a conversation with the Principal Secretary in charge of Diaspora and Foreign Affairs to just discuss exactly what these investments mean for Kenya and what can be done to ease the flow of these remittances, among other issues that the diaspora community is facing. Roseline Njogu is here with me in studio. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Betty.
Karibu sana. So those numbers, I mean, $4 billion is not, small money.
No, it's not. So
Kenya's economy is very dependent on the diaspora.
So the remittance, and that figure of $4 billion is actually about 3% of Kenya's GDP. And we have seen it grow steadily over the years. Right. In just this year alone, we have seen a growth between last year and this year of 14 point something %. So we expect to close the year at a stronger position than we began this year. So there has been some growth. But that figure is significant in that $4 billion is larger in terms of forex than our earnings from tea, earnings from coffee, from horticulture, even from direct foreign aid. So it is a large enough number for us to pay attention, especially because a lot of those funds have come in uncoordinated ways. It is Kenyans sending money home to send their children to hospital, their families to school, to pay rent, to pay a little bit of mchango here and there when somebody's in the hospital or unwell, and about 20% only comes in for investments. So in an uncoordinated fashion, with small ticket sizes every month, people have been able to send money home in this way, and we have come to that $4 billion point. The other thing I think to note, Betty, is that is only what we're able to track through the CBK. So there's a lot of other remittances that are not tracked through CBK. For example, if I'm coming home from Ireland, somebody might say, can you take this $500 home to my mother, and so on. So there's flows there that we've not been able to track or measure, and so we know that the true figure of remittances is actually much, much higher than that.
Right. So one of the challenges that Kenyans face, or most Africans face, when they're remitting money home, is the high cost of remittances. It has been a challenge. Africa has the highest rates in the world. What is the government doing, especially in collaboration with the private sector, to reduce this cost? Right.
So, and you're right to say that money, particularly coming to Africa, is a fairly expensive corridor for financial flows. And we're working hard to bring those numbers down. It's actually one of the SDGs to bring down the cost of remittances. Now, Kenya itself has brought down that number significantly, but we think there is a lot more room for growth and for improvement, and we can bring that number even lower. Unlike other countries, we have the advantage of having products, particularly tech-enabled products such as M-Pesa, and our fintech industry is fairly well developed. So we find that it is much easier for Kenyans to send money home. We have now a number of remittance companies or payments companies that complete transactions. A number of our financial banks and financial institutions already work and have either agencies or are able to set up accounts for diasporians abroad. And so movement of money has become significantly easier. Many of these remittance companies or digital banks allow you, for example, to put money in your mobile wallet and then be able to pay directly to M-Pesa or pay directly to pay bills and that kind of thing. So the rates are coming down, but we think it's not enough. So we've been engaging the CBK, we're engaging banks, we're engaging everybody who works within that remittance network to see how we can not just bring the cost of remittance lower, but also make it easier for people to send money home and make those opportunities of what do you call them now, facilities available in many places. In some places it's still a bit difficult to be able to access these, but we have, these are the things that we are doing. Some countries who have not had the advantages that we have, you will see set up things like diaspora banks and so on to allow them to do this remittance. But we feel like we've been able to leapfrog that because of our own advancements in fintech and in these spaces with a lot of players in that remittance space. Then we are able to pretty much bypass that step and move to just being able to complete payments in a much easier way.
Right, that is definitely an advantage that Kenya has,
Absolutely.
Being the digital hub of the region.
Absolutely.
Now, even as we bring down the cost of these remittances, sending the money, there's the issue of investments. I mean, people in the diaspora want to invest back home, but I mean, I think everyone has had the story. You're sending money for a house to be built, you come back, there's no house, you know? So what is being done to ensure that even as diasporians, send money for investments, they're investing right, and it's, honest investments that are happening?
So that's a really good question. It's pertinent, and it's something that diasporians, I think, are very concerned about. It's something as GOK we are concerned about, but it's also something I think as a society we ought to be concerned about. When did we become so fraudulent that our brothers send us money and we use it for, and the stories are unfortunate. Stories like, I sent money home, I want to roof my house and put windows, I come back, the uncle that I sent money to has not roofed my house but has married a new wife, right? So these are some of the stories that we hear often. So a number of things are being done. One, we're encouraging diaspora to find out and use direct investments. So you do not need to send money to your uncle or through you, and I say uncle because uncles have really been implicated in this story. You do not need to send money direct to your uncle. What you need to do is actually do the investment directly. And opportunities for that kind of investment have come through. For example, just a few months ago, the CBK was able to launch the DAO CSD, which is basically an app or a web-based platform that allows you to directly from the comfort of your phone, be able to make investments and purchase treasury bills and treasury bonds directly from your phone wherever you might be. And that product is going to be revamped and improved to even allow diasporians even more flexibility as far as whether they have a Kenyan bank account or not. So we are seeing increased independence of diaspora in choosing the products that they want to invest in and in being able to invest directly, whether it is in money markets, whether it is in purchasing property as far as real estate is concerned and so on. Real estate remains sticky because and I'm not sure why, a lot of people still shy away from using reputable lawyers or reputable firms when doing purchases, and instead you ask a family member to do due diligence for you and so on. We ask and we continue to ask diasporians to use reputable consulting firms, reputable lawyers, reputable architects in these kinds of things. Within GOK, we are working out and we are thinking through how can we better support these kinds of projects through what we will be creating called the Diaspora Investment Office. And that's going to be to lend a lot of capacity as far as managing or oversighting those kinds of projects and those kinds of products for diaspora, as well as just supervising some of these things and assuring them of their investment. So it's really a multi-pronged thing. One, we need to get more information to you so that you know what the different options are. You don't have to buy land, but Kenyans have a thing about land. So you don't have to buy land. And if you're interested in real estate, it doesn't have to be that you buy and develop your own property. You can get a REIT. You can buy other products that allow you to play in the real estate space. But there are all of these other different products that you can invest in the NSC. You can invest and capital markets. There's lots of other spaces for you to invest in. And that's why part of putting out that information for diaspora to be able to consume then is part of the reason why we are putting up the Diaspora Investment Conference that's coming up next week here at the KICC. Right,
we shall be talking more about that conference in just a little bit. We want to take a quick break here on Prime Edition. When we come back, this conversation continues. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with the Prime Edition. We are having a conversation on matters Diaspora Affairs, and this conversation is happening with the Principal Secretary in charge of Diaspora and Foreign Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course. This is Roseline and Njogu. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you so much.
Right. So let's talk about what the State Department has been able to achieve. I mean, it's a year in office now.
Yes.
There are a lot of challenges that diasporians have been facing, including, not getting as much or enough services as they should be getting from embassies and consulates because of, underfunding and limited HR personnel. What is the State Department doing on that?
So that's a really good question. And yes, indeed, we are a year old. So as a new State Department, we're very excited about that. And this is a great opportunity for us to reflect and look back on what we've been able to accomplish in the first year of operations. The reason the State Department for Diaspora Affairs was set up within the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs is to give targeted and structured service and attention to the diaspora, realizing that the 3 million to 4 million Kenyans who live abroad are a critical part of who we are. And because they are citizens, they have rights and are entitled to certain services. Now, what the Diaspora Affairs State Department has been doing is structuring and systematizing government's response and government's approach to diaspora affairs. So a lot has been done. We work very closely with the embassies. Of course, they're a part of our ministry. While the embassies, strictly speaking, belong to the State Department for Foreign Affairs, and my brother, Dr. Korir Singoe, is the PS for Foreign Affairs. We work extremely closely because there is no service to the diaspora without going through the embassies and the consulates. Some of the things that the ministry has been doing is actually expanding our footprint as far as where these embassies are. Earlier today, you saw that the president was commissioning the incoming ambassadors or the ambassador designate who are moving to different countries. And one of the things that he emphasized in his address to them today is that they must put at the forefront service and protection of the diaspora, and then diaspora rights, diaspora interests, Kenyans' interests, and so on. So we are working very closely with the embassies, and we've done a lot of good work in the last 1 year to serve Kenyans. Just as an example, in the last 12 months that we've been in business, we've been able to run what we call the mobile consular services in about 20 countries now. What that means is, because it can be expensive to come to the embassy to get your passport renewed or your ID or these kinds of services, we've taken services mashinani lakini maju, right? So we've moved around and we've taken services to countries where we don't actually have an embassy, or in places where we have embassies, but we have large swaths of land like the US, Canada, Australia. We have moved around in a number of cities and served people there. In just those mobile consular services clinics, we've been able to serve well over 9,000, maybe 10,000 people in just the last 12 months, delivering thousands of passports, IDs, birth certificates, and so on. And that has, from our own math, saved diasporians something like 3.8 billion shillings in terms of what it would have cost them to have gone to the embassies to receive services. So it's a huge saving as far as diaspora is concerned, and it speaks to our commitment to get people services where they are without them having to spend excessive amounts of money just to get government documentation and so on. And these MCSs, the mobile consular services, have allowed us to interact with diaspora and find out what are the issues that ail them and be able to target certain interventions to specific diaspora communities. We have found interesting things that have enriched how we respond to them. So that's one of the things that we've been able to do to sort of bring services closer to the people, working together, of course, with the State Department for Immigration, at some point with Interior and Government Chemists, with Foreign Affairs. It's been really a multi-agency approach for these mobile consular services. We've also been able to serve some of the most vulnerable Kenyans. When I assumed office a year ago, one of the things that was my biggest problem is we found a crisis in the Middle East as far as labor migrants are concerned. There was a lot of buzz at the time on social media and other media about housekeepers and domestic workers, particularly in the Middle East, particularly in Saudi Arabia, being abused and so on. And we've worked tirelessly over the last 1 year with our contemporaries and our colleagues in the Ministry of Labor and with the governments in Saudi Arabia, for example, to stabilize this situation. And I think you will agree with me that it has been a while since you've covered a story around distress in the Middle East. And if you're monitoring social media, you will have noticed that those numbers have significantly gone down. So a big part of our job in this first year has really been to stabilize the consular situation, stabilize services, and just get the diaspora to a point where they've received services and we are now able to build on that conversation. Of course, some of the things that come in from that are things that are thrown at you like wars and conflict. So just this year, we've had 2 breakout, one in Sudan that is very close to home, and now we have an ongoing situation in Israel and Palestinian regions. And part of our work as the State Department for Diaspora has been to coordinate the evacuation of Kenyans from those places. In April, for example, when we evacuated Kenyans from Sudan, we were able to evacuate about 1,100 Kenyans in a very short time. And let me say this, apart from Egypt that shares a border with Sudan, we were the first country to get its citizens home. The first country in the world to get its citizens home, apart from those who could quite simply cross the border, being Egypt. Which is a fantastic thing that we were able to do for Kenyans, because these are people, a number of them who are very, very vulnerable. We have done the same for Kenyans in Israel and Gaza and continue to do that. So the first year has really been how to deliver services, sometimes with resource constraints, but to use innovative methods and see how we are able to do that. And I think we have succeeded quite some.
Right.
Yeah.
So beyond the conversations you're having with the governments of, where Kenyans are, is there, are there any legal, proceedings towards this? I mean, in terms of international, legal migration law, is there anything that is happening?
So that's a really good question. As far as labor migration is concerned, one of the movements, so we, of course, we as a country have international norms and international law that govern labor migration. We are bound by ILO documents, for example, around labor migration. Right. But beyond at that international level, domesticating those species and borrowing best practices from other places and changing our own domestic law to respond to these issues. We are a labor sending country, right? So we have to create systems that protect labor migrants who leave this country and go elsewhere. One of the things led by the Ministry of Labor that has happened is that we now have before Bunge the Labor Migration Management Bill, which does many things. It structures our response to migrant workers. It helps us think through how do you protect a person who is often vulnerable because of their socioeconomic status? How do you deal with some of the emerging problems that we are seeing? For example, Betsy, in the last few years, we've been able to note a feminization of migration, which means increasingly the number of people who are moving away from for work are women. And that has come with certain complications. We see, for example, women who move to places where they don't have access to family planning. This becomes a crisis. How does a country respond to that? So we have this piece called the Labor Migration Management Bill that sets up a migrant welfare fund that allows us then to have money as GOK to be able to evacuate people who are in a bad situation, to repatriate them, to allow them to appoint counsel and lawyers in countries where they are so that their rights are better protected, because this is a gap that we have seen, and so on. So the Migrant Workers Fund, for example, is going to be critical in protecting their rights. Other than that, of course, we've created a global labor strategy between the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, the Ministry of Labor, and other players like TVET and Immigration and Foreign Affairs. That global labor strategy is GOK's statement of intent on what we're going to do with the problem of unemployment. And we think that that unemployment issue is going to be answered in a number of pieces. There's, of course, growing the economy here, so we have more local jobs. There are digital jobs, but a chunk of that is going to be met by jobs in the diaspora. So that labor strategy explains how we intend to do that, and that has been done. And now we are in the space of implementing that. That has come with creatures like the Diaspora Placement Agency, now an agency under the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, that will help us find jobs abroad for Kenyans and be able to match them to those opportunities. So a lot of good stuff is happening. A lot of heavy lifting is happening. Of course, you have to think about other things, such as how do you prepare then a labor migrant to go and work abroad? How do you, quote unquote, harden the person? Do you give them information? What kind of pre-migration training do you give them? What kind of pre-departure training do you give them? What resources do you give them before they leave, so they know what their rights are, where they can go for help, what their contracts mean, and so on? And this has been done, of course, with quite some learning from other countries that have gone before us, such as India, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, where we've done some benchmarking work and so on to understand what did they get right, but also what did they miss, so that we are able to build our systems to respond to those issues.
Right. We hope that that happens sooner.
It is already happening, Betty.
Great.
Yes.
All right, so now let's talk about the investment conference.
Yes.
Yeah? Tell us about it. When is it starting, and what do you hope to achieve?
Oh, so this is exciting because it's our first big event here in the country. All our events are usually, of course, in the diaspora, or for us, mashinani, or where all of these things are happening. So this is on the 13th to the 15th of December, which is next week, Wednesday to Friday, here at the KICC in Nairobi. It has panels, it has exhibitions, it has success stories. It's a really rich extravaganza of things. What we're trying to do here is to capitalize on the fact that diasporians are coming home for Christmas. And while they're here, we want to tell them this is what the country has to offer as far as investment opportunities are concerned. We want to go beyond the usual conversation of Kenya is a great place to invest, or we have all these tax incentives and so on, and we will do that. We'll paint what the investment climate is, and we'll talk about incentives and so on, but we want beyond there for diasporians to meet Kenyans presenting real business opportunities. So there will be people exhibiting real estate opportunities. There will be companies exhibiting whatever is available on the capital markets, what is available. Of course, I mentioned CBK. We'll be talking about their DAO CSD. There will be fintechs that will be pitching for diaspora funding. So it's a really exciting mix of panels. Diaspora will be talking about some of their challenges. The counties, and this is a critical part, the counties will be there to present what are the bankable projects in their counties. So if I live in Canada and I come from Kathunzweni and I want to invest in Kathunzweni specifically, so we hope that the Machakos County is there to say, and we are bringing the counties to say, in Machakos, here are some of the bankable projects that you can immediately invest in. We don't want people to leave money on the table. We want them to actually invest in some of these curated opportunities that we're going to be placing before them. Okay. His Excellency the President is going to be to open this conference, and he's probably the biggest supporter of diaspora, so we are looking forward to having that, and the Deputy President is supposed to attend, of course. Beyond government officials, a lot of private sector is going to be there. It's a great time to have this conversation as people are coming home for Christmas.
Right, we wish you all the best on that.
Asante sana.
Awesome. I'll give you 30 seconds to give me your closing remarks. We are out of time.
Oh, really? That was quick.
I know.
Probably just to say this has been a fantastic year. We have done a lot as a State Department, and the future is bright. And my call for diaspora, now that we have stabilized some of these basic issues, is to ask diaspora, what are you going to be known for in this country? What is the thing that you are going to bring this country as far as, whether it's technology, whether it's investment? How is your being away going to play a critical role in the destiny of this nation? And that is what we are looking for.
Pertinent question. Thank you for speaking with us.
Asante sana.
That is Roseline Njogu, the Principal Secretary in charge of Diaspora Affairs, speaking to us about just what the State Department is doing to ensure that the diaspora that are very critical to Kenya's economy is the top foreign exchange earner, diaspora remittances, that is, what the State Department is doing to ensure that their processes are seamless and the experience in the diaspora is much better than it is right now. Well, that is the business news we had for you this evening. Sports news is coming up right after this break. Do stay with the Prime Edition.